you. Thanks to everyone for being here. I want to ask one of my heroes to stand up for a moment. Claudine Schneider, would you stand up for just a moment? Claudine Schneider served in the U.S. Congress for 10 years, representing citizens of Rhode Island. Lived in Boulder, Colorado for about 20 years now. Yep. And so she was an inspiration a long time ago and still is, and I thank you for being here tonight. And served on the results board some years ago.
That's what I wanted to also mention, definitely. And I will say that Sam has been and continues to be my hero in terms of a champion for what he believes in. And there is no challenge too great. He's working on poverty, I'm working on climate change. I mean, you know, hey, no big deal, we can do this. So, thank you, Sam.
Thanks. If you could help with forwarding this,
Okay.
that's great.
So,
Okay, next one. A couple of thank yous. Bob and Barb, would you stand up for a moment? Marty and Jim, where are Marty and Jim?
Right over here.
Salha, please stand up for a moment. I want to thank you for your help in pulling this together, and we're really grateful for all that you've put in. And now especially Laura and Steve.
Thank you.
Opening
one time a
roles.
year we do something good. Thank you for being here. That's what it is. Thank you guys.
Thank you for opening your home to us. It's really wonderful. And I want to thank everyone, you and everyone who's here. And I have a certain way that I thank people, and it's with a quote from the late Republican Senator Mark Hatfield of Oregon, who said many years ago, "We stand by as children starved by the millions because we lack the will to eliminate hunger. Yet we have found the will to develop missiles capable of flying over the polar cap and landing within a few hundred feet of their target. This is not innovation," Hatfield said. "It is a profound distortion of humanity's purpose on Earth." And I say that your being here is an expression of your commitment to correcting that distortion of humanity's purpose on Earth. I'm not going to focus so much on Results' ending poverty mission, which is critical. I'm going to focus a bit more on Results' reclaiming democracy vision. And so we can go on, which also is critical. And I want to just say this, I'll say it now and at the end. Funding of Results matters because of our work to end poverty. But it also matters because of our work to empower citizens. And it also matters because our work through my current entity under Results Ed Fund, Civic Courage, to empower other organizations to use this methodology for their own citizens. This is a talk I've done lately. The title is Our Shouting and Silence Are Only Two Options. Bringing bipartisanship and transformation to civic activism. And so I really ask you to play with the ideas that I'm going to throw out here this evening and see how this sings to you or not. Nick Kristof is a New York Times columnist, and he wrote me in April, and he asked, what can people do to protect programs or promote programs that they're committed to? And I said, well, essentially, there's two things you can do. You can either meet your member of Congress, or you can meet your member of Congress, and you can either do it face-to-face in a kind of a protest mode, very valuable, very needed. It's not my style, it's not Results' style, but very important. Or you can meet face-to-face in a bipartisan, relationship-building, visionary mode, and I'm going to talk about this mostly tonight. So the predicament is, if I say to a normal person, like 90 million Americans didn't vote in the last election, if I say to a normal person, meet with your member of Congress, all of a sudden there's a barrier that Francis Moore Pay, who wrote Diet for a Small Planet 40-something years ago, really brings up in one of these quotes from a more recent book. She said, our real problem is not a heating planet or rampant malnutrition. We only have one real problem, our own feelings of powerlessness to manifest the solutions right in front of our noses. So the thing I always say to people, find an organization that will help dissolve your powerlessness. And that's what I'd say Results' gift is a deep commitment to dissolving the powerlessness. In February, I wrote about an earlier version of this talk on Facebook, and a friend wrote back and said, yeah, but I still don't know what to do next. And I wrote back and saying, the trick is to get yourself to the point where you're not just feeling wildly ineffective on 10 different issues, but where you're feeling profoundly effective on one. You can click away or whatever on the other 9, but you're still feeling profoundly effective on one, which brings us back to this challenge. The trick is getting away, go to the next one, The challenge is finding an organization that helps you feel profoundly effective. That's the gig. And on the next slide is where I really come to, So let me do this. This is my story. This is my story about the founding of Results. This is my story from hopelessness to activism. And so it starts like this. You heard a little of it from Bob. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in music. And I played percussion instruments in the Miami Philharmonic for 12 years. I taught high school music. Raise your hand if you ever were a student of mine. We only have one, okay.
That was loaded.
And then, 37 years ago, I founded the anti-poverty lobby Results. And I'm often asked, music poverty lobby, what was that about? What was the motivation? And when I look back in my life, there are a couple of experiences that started pointing to the shift. I graduated from high school in 1964, and I played timpani in the orchestra at the graduation. And just before the ceremony, a flute player came back to the percussion section and told me that a high school fraternity brother of mine, a year younger, had died the day before in a tractor-trailer accident in Georgia. It was her next-door neighbor, so she knew about it before I did. But I always say, I was 17. When I was 17, I thought I had forever. I mean, mortality was an irrelevant concept. But during the mourning period, the funeral, after the funeral, I went with my friend's younger brother to get his report card from the homeroom teacher. It began to dawn on me that maybe I had 17 more minutes or months or years, and the questions of purpose came up. 4 years later, 1968, college graduation, Robert Kennedy is assassinated right in those days. And it's another one of this, what is this life? What is this death? Why am I here? It's graduation again. What am I here to do? No answers, but the questions are getting clearer. 9 years later, I'm a little slow. It's 1977 now, 40 years ago. I'm invited to a presentation on ending world hunger put on by the Hunger Project. And I go to this thing thinking, well, hunger's inevitable. What do I know? I'm a musician. It's inevitable because there are no solutions. What do I know? Because if there were solutions, somebody would have done something by now. But I go to this thing and it's obvious there's no mystery to growing food or clean water or basic health or none of that stuff is mysterious. I'm not hopeless about the perceived lack of solutions. I'm hopeless about human nature, people. We'll just never get around to doing the things that can be done, but there's one human nature I have some control over, my own, and my questions, why am I here, what am I here to do? So I get involved in a big way. This is the end of the story. Bob basically told it, but I spoke to 7,000 students before going into the first high school classroom. I read statements from the National Academy of Sciences, Food and Nutrition Study, calling for the political will to end hunger, and asked 7,000 students, what's the name of your member of Congress? Fewer than 3% could answer correctly. 97% could not. And results grew out of this gap between the calls for the political will to end hunger and the basic information on who represented us. So this takes us back to our predicament. I mean, the story I told was a lovely story, but we're still stuck here. And I'll read it. Lawrence Lessig, Harvard professor, working to get money out of politics. He said, it was 2 years ago, we did a poll and found that 96% of Americans want money out of politics, but 91% say it isn't possible. You can go to the next one. That's the politics of resignation. But the politics of resignation gives you a perfect strategy for winning. How do we thaw the resignation? Because once we do, I think we can win this one. And Results' gift is a deep commitment to thawing the resignation. But how? And so this is my really only slide on this. We can go ahead. If we're in a room like this to launch a chapter, and there are about 30 here, and 15 raise their hand and say, I'm in, the question is, in what? What did you just promise to the organization, and what did the organization promise to you? Is it mostly informational and wonky, or is it aspirational, inspirational, and empowering? So, for example, with the groups that I coach, and I'm going to start getting to some of those in a moment, they do what Results does, which is a monthly conference call with guest speakers and Q&A and etc., so that there's this monthly, not one training a year and good luck and let us know how it goes, but this month in, month out structure of support. The second one is how's the enrollment into it? So Sarah Avery is here from one of the groups I coach, which I'll talk a little bit more in a moment, but you were one of the first 7 chapters of the Quaker Lobby FCNL's advocacy teams. That was 2.5 years ago, and now they're 82. So how powerful is the enrollment into the structure? And the last one is focus. Is it 2 months on this, and then 2 months on this, and then with this assumption, mistaken assumption, that it keeps it interesting to keep changing the issue? Well, no. If you have kids or a job or other responsibilities, it makes you crazy when you do that. Let's go to the next one. So what's difference has it made? And this is, Barb had raised this, and this is a little more descriptive. We began in the U.S. lobbying on child survival in 1984 and lobbied every year for the last 33 years on this child and maternal health program. And this one program has gone from 25 million in the early 80s to 715 million today, not counting other related accounts. UNICEF's report, you can go to the next one, that, and this is actually, I'll correct this, that before Barb was talking about, in 83, UNICEF was reporting 41,000 child deaths a day from preventable things like measles and malnutrition, and today it's not 18, the latest number is 16,000 a day. So you get that reduction. Go to the next one. In a New York Times interview in 2013, former UNICEF Deputy Executive Director Kul Gautam said, to a great extent, it was because of the receptivity created by Results that U.S. funding for child survival increased so dramatically, and that led many other countries to come on board. So now let's go to the next one. So this year, the president asked for a 29% cut to the State Department diplomats and a 29% cut to foreign assistance programs. And Results volunteers led in getting 143 Republican and Democrats to write letters to the chair of the Appropriations Committee saying, don't make these 29% cuts. They probably will not. It's not over yet, so I'm not giving you the end because we don't know. But asking not to make cuts to programs like Child and Maternal Health, the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, and the like. Let's go to the next one. Okay, this is in that same vein of our predicament. This is a column from 10 years ago by Frank Rich in the New York Times, where he said, last weekend, a recent poll found that 24% of Americans believe our country's on the right track. 74% of respondents told pollsters the country's on the wrong track. This is 10 years ago. He said, wrong track is a euphemism. We are a people in clinical depression. This is 10 years ago. Americans know that the ideals which once set our nation apart from the world have been vandalized. I love his choices of words. I go to the next one. This is my response to that quote. Most nonprofit organizations don't acknowledge the toxicity into which they send their volunteer advocates. Consequently, they don't create a powerful enough structure of support that can be the antidote to that toxicity. Instead, they offer mouse-click activism, thin gruel for anyone hungry to make a difference. So go ahead to that next one. So some of the groups using the results methodology, which is another reason to support this work. Citizens Climate Lobby, I coached them for 7 years. They just turned 10. Claudine's on their board. They've enrolled 31 Republicans and 31 Democrats in joining the House Climate Solutions Caucus, when 3 years ago there wasn't one Republican that would join anything called climate in it. The Quaker Lobby Friends Committee on National Legislation has started, I coached them for 2 years. They're now 2.5 years old, this piece of it, the advocacy teams. They've started 82 teams. This morning in the Denver Post, as if on cue, the lead editorial. Would you stand up, Sarah, for a moment? Your team, you met with the editorial board 3 weeks ago about urging them to do an editorial on reducing the military budget, the Pentagon budget. That's in this morning's Denver Post. And another, I love on the side of the wall of the FCNL office in DC, it says, love thy neighbor, no exceptions. And American Promise, I've been coaching for 1 year. Their focus is on overturning Citizens United. Like all of these groups, very passionate about bringing Republicans on board, bipartisan. They've started 13 chapters since April 1st of this year, and it's also critical work. Let's go to the next one. So let me just go ahead and say it before I give you, oh, I have to say this? One aspect of a process is spiritual. It's actually bringing love to politics. I guess I just said it, didn't I?
Wow.
Oh, well, whatever. One CCL volunteer called it sacred and profound. Go to the next one. Oh, that's sad. In E&E News, which is a Beltway, it's on energy and environment. That's funny that that didn't show up. Tom Moyer, a CCL volunteer who works with Representative Mia Love, Republican of Utah, said, it's impossible to convince anyone of anything if you fundamentally don't like them. Quote, if you walk in thinking they're an idiot and evil, you're done from the start. It doesn't matter how logical your position is. He said you have to put yourself in a place where you can find something to respect in them. Let's go to the next one. Sorry, I apologize. So this is me talking now. You might have a low opinion of your member of Congress, but you have to decide whether you're committed to being right about that or you're committed to creating a transformation. You decide. But the bottom line is we will not end global poverty. We will not reverse climate change. We will not overturn Citizens United with Democrats only or Republicans only. It has to be bipartisan or transpartisan. So I heard this on the Quaker Lobby advocacy team call a couple of weeks ago. They were asked at their conference to answer this. One way I've grown in the past year from my advocacy team work with FCNL is my heart is more tender. Now, who the hell do you know that responds that their activism has resulted in my heart is more tender, loving, and hopeful than it's been in many years, not just the last year? Someone else answered, one way I've grown is becoming more aware that I'm not alone in this endeavor to save the world, that we are connected as a team and as an organization. Thank you for taking this weight off my shoulders, and I will try to carry my share. You can go to the next one. So I just want to close with this and a quote. Maybe close with this and two quotes, but funding results matters because of our work to end poverty. But it also matters because of our work to empower citizens. But it also matters through our work with Civic Courage under Results Ed Fund to empower other organizations with this kind of methodology. And this quote here is my new favorite quote. It's from Alex Steffen. I've never met him. He said, I'm going to say this twice. It's too good for once. Optimism is a political act. Those who benefit from the status quo are perfectly happy with a large population of people who think nothing will get any better. I love this. In fact, these days, cynicism is obedience.
Wow.
What's really radical is being willing to look at the magnitude and difficulty of the problems we face and still insist that we can solve those problems. Optimism is a political act. Those who benefit from the status quo are perfectly happy with a large population of people who believe nothing will get any better. In fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. What's really radical is being willing to look right at the magnitude and difficulty of the problems we face and still insist we can solve these problems. Why don't you go two more, and I'm going to, two more, yeah, next one. So the gig is finding organizations that help you move out of your comfort zone. Do you know how nervous Sarah was before she went into the meeting with the Denver Post editorial board? To help you move out of your comfort zone over to where the magic happens. And if you stay in your comfort zone, you miss out on the magic. And the last slide, and actually, I'm going to ask you to skip it so no one tests whether I get it right. This is from George Bernard Shaw's Man and Superman. This is the true joy in life. The being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one. The being a force of nature, instead of a selfish, feverish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to make you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch, which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. My thing with groups I coach, if the quote is good enough to say, then you ought to say it twice so it can sink in. This is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being a force of nature, instead of a selfish, feverish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch, which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations.
Well, you can see why we brought Sam.